All right, thanks everyone. Apologies for the slight hiccups at the beginning, but we're good to go now. So this, one second, do not disturb, engaged. All right, so this is called Does Your Data Have a Story? And what we're gonna talk about here is a concept in analytics called data storytelling. And as you'll see, I'll demonstrate this in a bit, but as you will see, it's slightly different than what we tend to think of as either enterprise reporting, obviously, or even dashboarding. Dashboarding tends to be the design of reusable content where the user comes into that content every day or every other day or however often, and he or she will look at a set of visualizations, KPIs, measurements of the business, so to speak, and those are pretty consistent. You tend to use the same dashboards. Every visit, maybe you bounce around between a few, but you tend to use the same dashboards because they've been designed to give you this reusable content. Data storytelling is a whole other endeavor, and it's about making a case with data. It's about communicating findings you've made to one or more recipients. And this is a feature of Oracle Analytics that really doesn't exist in other tools. It is a feature that they believed strongly in when they were building it, and it kind of doesn't have other competitors. So when you start thinking about analytics tools, and if you're thinking about, and if what you see here is interesting, and that you think maybe I would like to have the capabilities to do data storytelling, then there aren't a lot of other tools that really compete with it. So let's get going. Does your data have a story? That's a picture of me, as you can tell, because the camera's on. A little bit more professional than this. I'm the founder and CEO of Red Pill Analytics. And if you're interested in following me in any of these social media avenues, I'd be honored if you'd do that and try to keep up with what we have going on at Red Pill, and you're interested in what I'm doing personally. Those are some good ways to follow me. And this is just we got a couple of slides about Red Pill. Hopefully you'll bear with us through that. But this is just an idea of the things that we do for our customers. Sometimes we do a small chunk of this. Sometimes we do all of this for our customers, and we can really dial in anywhere in between this range of services. There's usually data engineering and data visualization as a piece of what we do for customers, but we do design, build, and we can even begin with strategy of where you're at and where you want to go, and we've taken many customers on that journey. And so if you're interested in engaging with us just to talk about what's possible, all the way through to the final product, we can do anything in between. And these are some of the standard tools that we use. If you followed Red Pill or been aware of us for a while, we began very much as an Oracle consulting company, Oracle on-prem, really to be more specific. And over the years, we've evolved. The cloud has taken us pretty far in that evolution, trying to make things easier for our customers. It's also taken us outside the red tent. We're not just an Oracle consulting company any longer, but Oracle is a part of what we do. And so that's why we're talking about Oracle Analytics today. It's Oracle Analytics as a suite is a product that I've been working with for many, many years, and many of us at Red Pill have. So we're quite aware of how it works and its features. But what we're looking at today is some fairly new functionality in the last few years. Hasn't been around, hasn't existed in the product as long as some of the more legacy features. So if any of this looks interesting, or you think you might want a hand navigating some of these different technologies, please reach out. You can use the email that you registered with. You can come to our website. Any way you want to reach out to us, we'd be happy happy for you to do that. So when we think about what do we mean by data storytelling, and I alluded to this a little bit in the beginning, it isn't really about that final product. It isn't about that delivered dashboard that's been QA'd, that is being, exposed to a broad audience for reusability. It's more about one-on-one or one-on-many, but it's more about a conversation. It's about a journey through the data. And I'm going to demonstrate what that looks like in just a few minutes. But if you think about it, it's like telling a story with data, but having that data be live and having that data be referenceable and having that data easily at hand so that you and the audience with which you're presenting all are right there plugged into the data. It's also about context, and I think you'll see that as we go forward. Your dashboards usually don't have a lot of context. Now, maybe an individual dashboard might have context such as, sales, performance, margin, those sorts of things, right? But when you engage in a data storytelling endeavor, there is specific context in each and every point. And that context may not be applicable outside of that storytelling session. So it's about bringing just the right data to the story and having that data be a part of what you use visually to get across your point, perhaps to argue your point, to inform, or whatever it is we do in conversations with colleagues, customers, stakeholders about, what's going on, and data is the touch point by which we have those conversations. So let's bring it front and center. And also, if you think about traditional dashboarding or even traditional reporting, that's usually you, whoever the person is consuming it, and the product and what's been built in it. But a storyteller is your guide. So the product is a part, one of the tools that person will use, and it's probably the primary tool that person will use to get across some point that is being highlighted with the use of data. We tend to think about dashboards as being, the only way to really engage with our consumers with data, but there's so many other ways. And we see that today in the apps on our phone. Those aren't dashboards, those are touch points, those messages you receive from possible, people you're going to do business with, or from applications that you've signed up for, from services. Those small bits of data, those messages and those communications and those notifications are data driven. It's just a different way to consume it. And I've always loved this example. A lot of talks around data storytelling will use, Spotify as an example of what they do with data is very, very interesting. And so these sorts of messages, whether delivered directly to a recipient or broadcast widely, is not a dashboard. It's a visual cue that with data points, and you're going to see some of that today. So their reason for communicating this, obviously, is they want you to engage with Spotify, but they're doing it with some humor. They're doing it by making a very strong point of what makes data, of what is possible with data. So instead of a bunch of high level metrics, gauges, KPIs, and whatever you want to say, we're driving down deeper into what really moves people to action. And if there's something that you take away from this, as much as anything else, it is that data can be the avenue by which you call people to action. And data storytelling is just a wrapper around that makes it hopefully an enjoyable experience, but also a moving experience and a convincing experience. And, dear person who played Sorry 42 times on Valentine's Day, what did you do? I mean, that's I mean, that's as good as it gets from my perspective about, engaging with whoever it is you're trying to communicate with. No, come on. All right, we're gonna have, there we go. So those of you on the line who are watching the webinar who are clever, and I'm sure it's all of you, right? You may have noticed that actually we're already in data viz. We have been for the entire time. So I'm not using slides really, kind of. It's sort of a cheat, but data viz has the capability of a narrative view of data. And one of the visualizations is an image. And so I'm capable of layering in to my data screens, and you'll see plenty of those in a minute, whatever it is I want to try to communicate. And it doesn't have to be data driven. So up until this point, nothing's been data driven, but we're about to start the data storytelling piece. But this is just a point of, if you go to those regular meetings, or you have that one-time conversation with someone that you need to convince with data, we tend to export data from tools into things like PowerPoint. I use Google Slides, but export those data points into these tools. And what that introduces is overhead and maintenance. If it's a deck you have to give repeatedly, don't you want it live? And yes, over the years, I've seen connectors from things like PowerPoint out to Excel or out to Access or out to whatever. But frankly, that's not ideal. It's maintenance, it's headache. Just bring your audience into the tool itself. And this narrative. Let me exit out of here now that I've showed you what's up my sleeve. In data viz, we have the prepare area of the tool where we go and prepare data sets and model to a certain degree data sets and clean up data sets. I'm not really going to talk about that today. We also have the visualize, and this is where you bring data to this is where you actually build these visualizations that you can then consume. And typically in data viz, you're consuming in the visualization area. But the narrate area is a place for you to go and plug together a sequence of visualizations. And let's be frank, it looks like a slide deck. And there's a reason for that. It is not as feature rich as other presentation tools, but it doesn't have to be, because data is the point. And so if what you want to do is present or discuss data elements with your audience, then you might as well do it in a data visualization tool. So here are all the different canvases that I have built, and these canvases can be added to my narrative in such a way so that I can go through them one after another. So we'll go back into presentation mode, and now that you know what I'm up to. So we are inside of data viz, and the rest of this will be more data driven. So what I want to talk to you today about, I want to tell you a story, and I thought about a lot of data sets. Frankly, I considered COVID data sets, but I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm so tired of that, that I wanted to go on the lighter side and have a good time, but still make the points that I want to point, which is we can take a data set, any data set, perhaps aliens sightings data set, and try to tell a story and convince you of certain things. And so that's what I'm going to spend the rest of this time doing. We're sort of, removing the fourth wall a bit. We're stepping into a scenario, and now for the rest of this time, I'm going to tell you a data story. And this data story is about alien sightings in the United States. I used to have a screen, and when I did this with a regular slide deck that talked about the data set, I forgot to add that. I just realized it. But I'll tell you about it. There's a UFO sightings webpage where you can go and provide your sighting information. You give all the data points and even a description. And we'll do a little bit with textual data in a bit. This has been going on for many, many years, and you'll see that as we dive into the data, you'll see the complete data set. So the important thing to note is that it was done, we have data sightings going way, way back, and you'll see that. So it was done not through a website. Originally, it was done, frankly, I don't know. I don't know if it was, if your sighting information was mailed in, if you got on the phone and called it in, I'm not sure, but we have sightings going back, and you'll see that. So I'm gonna start to talk to you about the data set, and then I'm gonna start to try to convince you of certain things. Hopefully it'll be fun. So this is a high-level overview of the data set. So in the data set, we have a total number of sightings close to 80,000. Duration, so there's a data point of a sighting, right? That's sort of every row is a 1, right? So, if you call in a sighting, then we have a data point of that being, a number of sightings. And then we also, as a data point in that sighting, you describe the duration of the sighting. So we have 78,000 and change sightings, but we have 200,000 hours of sightings. So you can see that some sightings must last for a long time. You can see the data set goes all the way back to 1906, and it ends in 2013. I think there's a partial data set moving into 2014, so I just filtered 2014 out, as you can see, because it's not a representation of the entire year. So as we go through this data set, now I could put this is sort of a high level minus the fun I'm having over here. And again, I don't know if you see, good presenters, but they usually mix in visualizations, we'll just say images, I should say, in their presentations to try to drive home some sort of a response or reaction. And so I'm demonstrating throughout how you can also do that, right? So most of mine will be done with humor, but in general, you can try to kind of get across any point you want. And we all know there's loads of psychology behind it that a visualization is worth a lot. So, and that doesn't just have to be a data-driven visualization. And so this also starts to talk to you about why context is important in a data story. I would never deliver this dashboard as well, maybe I would, but probably you wouldn't deliver this dashboard in sort of a fit and finished dashboard for reusable consumption. But for telling a story, the context is important, and there's points I want to get across. So this high level, it's really tough for us to get an idea of drilling down into this data. Now, I could create a dashboard or a visualization that's drillable, but you can drill any direction you want. And what I want to show you today is that a data story does not provide the consumer the ability to drill. The storyteller drills. So I'm going to take you on a journey. And during this journey, I will be drilling into this data, but I'm very much in the driver's seat. And that's kind of the point. So we can see sort of not a lot of interesting changes in the data for really many, many years, right? But then we start to see some spikes in some places. And it's really difficult to give you an overall view of this because that spike doesn't look near as big as these spikes and these spikes. But we are going to drill into each of these spikes individually as different data points. And I'm going to talk to you about what I think might be at the heart of some of that with tons and tons of conjecture. So I hope you enjoy that. So you can see that in 1947, we'll get into that. We see through the 60s and on into the 70s, we see some spikes. And then obviously taking off in the 90s. Our friends were really starting to visit us a lot in the 90s. So let's get into it. So first I want to take a look at sightings from 1947 to 1964. And this is our first real spike. And this is me using a constant, okay? So again, declare your context during a story, right? This constant value is a reason that this dashboard probably, or this visualization, wouldn't be reusable because I've hard coded a constant here. And the reason I did that is we're drilling into small sections of the data set. I want to give you an idea of where we were at prior to this section of the data set. So this constant is where we were at in 1946. Now, I probably could find a way to automatically do that. As a matter of fact, I could, but I don't need to. This is my story. I'm telling a very data-driven story. So I just added the constant for the value that of sightings prior to 1947 to give you an idea of of this true spike we were seeing. And what I think you will see through this process is that a lot of the sighting bumps that we see and a lot of the shape of the data set as we move forward are driven by sort of our awareness. And that's one of the points I will make, is that it's probably not that we had more visits, if at all, frankly. It's not that we probably had more visits, but what was in our consciousness at the time? Where were we? What are the situations that might make sightings more prevalent? And that's what you'll see, and that's what I'm going to argue over the course of this data set. So obviously, Roswell. Now, does that mean that there were more sightings? Does that mean that, perhaps for the first time people realized that they could start to report these? Maybe this is when the data sighting service became part of our consciousness and people were just reporting it more. Or if as part of our consciousness, we're now giving a name to something that perhaps we would have ignored. And so, but regardless, definitely after Roswell, the amount of sightings increases pretty significantly. So moving on, so that's from 47 to 64. And then from 65 to 93, again, I use the constant from the prior period. So that's the Roswell period. So now we're in the near modern period. And, it's probably the space program, quite frankly. Again, what's in the consciousness of us that might cause us to make more reported sightings? Perhaps our space program caused more visits. I'm not ruling that out. I want to believe, but perhaps that's a possibility. It's really difficult to see in the data, but you can draw a few conclusions here. One is it's probably part of our consciousness that we're thinking about the stars and what's possible, because we've just crossed that incredibly difficult border of space travel. And now we're thinking about, well, it's certainly possible that other people are coming here. You can also see that I did some trending, right? So that is something that is reusable, right? I haven't hard coded that. So that's just a feature of the tool that allows you to declare with a couple of different sort of algorithms how you want to do trending. And then we get into what we call the modern period, right? And so again, I've used the constant. This is the constant from the prior period. So this is the highest row count prior to this period. And we see beginning in 1994 that we just have an amazing uptick. Now, I chose to believe that that this is because of the wildly successful and amazing TV show called The X-Files that I'm quite a huge fan of. But frankly, this is probably also when the data set went online. I don't want to minimize that, although I have more fun thinking it was The X-Files. But either because the data set became much easier to submit sightings, or, this was a very popular show and we all believed that aliens were invading us, that perhaps we, just had our eyes even more to the stars. Now, this what I'll call the modern period, 94 to 2013, is pretty much the basis, except for one more visualization, of the rest of the story. So I have drilled down through the data set to a place that I want to take you. And now I want to take you to the modern period. And I want to talk about some of the other things we can recognize that happened during the modern period. And so if we look at day of the month, so this is an interesting data point that took me, frankly, by surprise, is that when you think about the day of the month, it's the 1st and the 15th that are the most consistent. Now, because some months end on the 30th and some months end on the 31st, and I could probably drill into that a little bit, combine those as a singular element if I wanted to, we would maybe see the 31st as well. And what I'm theorizing here is payday, right? Now, why would that matter? Well, that's because on payday, there are and probably should bring some of these data sets to this as well. There's a lot of compelling evidence that people go out more on payday. And so what does that mean? Well, they're out at night and maybe they're having a few cocktails. So I'm not saying the cocktails are necessarily the reason for the sightings, but perhaps they do play a part. And so it was really interesting to think about the 1st and the 15th in this modern period. It seems logical that the introduction of payroll systems and consistent payments in the 1st and the 15th might tie into this a little bit. But actually, that 1st and the 15th, and let's give this a minute to load, hopefully, yeah. That 1st and the 15th is actually more prevalent across the entire data set than just the modern data set. I don't have an answer for that, except perhaps the 1st and the 15th is not a modern thing. I didn't research that. But perhaps the 1st and the 15th has been going on for much longer than I would have imagined. Now, this is a little bit of a cheat. I won't say it's a cheat because any visualization that gets your point across is a valuable one. Typically on a scatter plot, you're plotting two different measures because that's very difficult to do in a data visualization. Two data points that might not share the same sort of axis. But what I did here was actually chart the number of sightings against itself so that I could give you this nice diagonal line and then introduce the max and min feature of OAC to show you the distance is longer in the overall period than it is in the modern period. So, again, also I introduced outliers. So turned on Outliers, which is just a feature in the tool that you just simply turn on. You choose from several different algorithms. You can research those algorithms and understand of what the algorithms that are supported. There are reasons to use some or the other. The important point is that you don't have to be a PhD. You're standing on the shoulders of giants here. These are tried and true outlier algorithms that you can rely on pretty consistently. So this is me sort of cheating the scatter plot to make a visualization that tells the story that I want it to tell. And that is that actually, it's not the modern period where the 1st and the 15th sorry. It's not just that the 1st and the 15th are common in that modern period. Also, you can see I just put below it, a line chart to also sort of walk you through the data sets. Hopefully that makes sense. Yeah, and if you're new to OAC, I mean, this sort of reactivity it has, if you're new to data viz, I really should say, this sort of reactivity it has for you to hover over and see enhanced details really removes the need for things like legends. Really, you can see that I've removed all of the sort of the grid lines because frankly, they're not very pretty. But I don't need grid lines when I can easily hover over and see what the exact data points are. So just a little note to those designers out there that are hopefully building visualizations that are both informative, but also, let's face it, pretty, because if something's ugly, someone's less likely to use it. It is an important thing to consider is how this looks. Something that looks really, really good will be more used than something that doesn't. So now we're looking at sightings by month. Okay, so what month do we have the most sightings in? And it's clearly the 7th, so it's clearly July. And there's a lot of theories there. This is a sort of reasonably known data point in sort of culture, right? That July we have more alien sightings than anything else. And there's a lot of belief that it probably has to do with, you know, fireworks in the sky, people misrepresenting fireworks. But there's a couple of other things to notice here that we also see that, you know, the 6th and the 8th are equally high. And so what we're really seeing probably is a seasonal effect. And although July being the highest might have something, and we'll get into the 4th of July specifically in a bit, but probably what we're seeing here is something seasonal. It's warm, people are out at night more, and their skies are clear, you're looking up at the sky. It's probably more about location and the ability to have these sightings more regularly in the summer months. And we'll get into that a little bit too, a little bit more. We'll drill into that. So if we start to look at, this is a polynomial trend of sightings, right? So this is using the data viz color scheme plus the polynomial trend to break this up into quarters, right? But also to see the spikes, obviously, you guessed it, July 4th, but the overall trend across this, right? So this is, and frankly, I probably could do away with this. I'm not sure how much that's helping, because you pretty much understand that this is quarters. There's 4 of them, for goodness sakes. But, you know, this gives us an idea of the seasonality of it. We do see this overall trend in the summer months, but we also starts to point to us that, hey, there is something interesting going on one particular day of the year, and it's indisputable, right? So even though we see this seasonal trend, and it's definitely you know, something that exists, we also see that there's probably something else worth investigating. So next slide in our story, we're going to investigate it. So sightings by the day of the year. So this is day 185. Yep, day 185, which normally, or more often than not, is the 4th of July. It is sometimes July 3rd. So that's a difficult point to get across with a single visualization. Therefore, I provided you 2. And this really, this again is a cheat of the tool. Now, there are bullet charts now in Data Viz, and perhaps I should revisit how I built this, but I built this before there were bullet charts in Data Viz. This is just a bar chart where I filtered it down to day 185 and then used further segmenting to break it up across when the day is July 4th. So day 185 is the one I pulled out of the data set and filtered into a bar chart so that I got a single bar. But then I used day of month to further break that down and then actually give you a percentage. So I think it's an interesting way to tell a stacked story, something that's clearly, if this were 50-50, how compelling is that? Again, context is important. I know the results ahead of time. Therefore, I was able to build a visualization that clearly made my point. So this is 4th of July, clearly, it's not seasonal. It's not the day of the month. It's not the month of the year. It is because it's the 4th of July. And it's really difficult to make that any clearer. So we have to assume that there are some fireworks at play here, and whether the fireworks are because people are, confusing fireworks with aliens, or is it because they're looking at the sky in the middle of the night, perhaps for the longest that anyone looks at the sky on a particular day of the year. There's a lot of theories there, and we could, provide additional data sets and drill into that. Hour of the day, which I think is interesting, might be what you expect, right? So my British friends probably can do that math very quickly, but I believe that's 9 and 10, right? Yeah. So so clearly, in the evening, when it's dark, and that might be for a number of reasons. Might be because people are out and maybe they have had a few libations or a few cocktails. Or it might be because we're looking up at the sky and it's hard to see flashing lights in the middle of the day, or it's harder to see flashing lights in the middle of the day. I've never clearly understood why aliens need flashing lights. Seems like if they were trying to be as covert as they must be trying to be to stay hidden all this time, they maybe would put on the low beams when they came to visit us. But apparently flashing lights are a part of alien flight technology. So it's probably because we're more able to see in the night sky these sightings, or have these sightings. So density. So this is an area that I'll say Oracle Analytics specifically. I don't know if you've been using OBI for a long time. What we used to have to do geography was really, frankly, Herculean. And in fairness to OBI, most tools of that era were similar. They just didn't come out of the box with the ability to detect and determine geographical data points the way that the new tools are. So what's really interesting is that, sighting density on day 185. So again, we're in the modern period. We're still drilling down further and further as we go. So everything we're looking at is the 4th of July. We're looking at between the hours of 9 and 10, those interesting hours we had, and in the modern period. So this is the sighting density. So we can see that there are obviously a few hot points here and there, but really the Midwest, aliens love the Midwest. It's God's country, I guess. And that's where they like to visit the most, or at least in the modern period they do, and at least on the 4th of July. So that is a destination. That's a destination for aliens, the Midwest. They don't like the coasts. So I really debated about taking this out because frankly, the outliers are broken. But I really should. Open to ticket on this, by the way. Obviously, I'll hear something back soon. This is our outlier. It's clearly, this is our outlier and this is our outlier. I don't know why the algorithm's not working, to be determined. In a prior release of OAC, it worked perfectly, and then this is the newest release, and I just didn't remove it, but you should see the outliers work correctly. But we can see that our outliers, as we expected, at least with, we're drilling in a little bit more to the geography. And I'm just going to tell you that this is an outlier, even though the visualization thinks it's not. Our outliers are California, Washington, and Illinois, Missouri. Those probably aren't outliers, actually. It's these two, right? So again, Midwest is a popular destination. So this is interesting. There's probably, let's be frank, there might be better ways to do this, but what I was trying to get across with this visualization story I was telling is one of the sighting elements is the shape. And so we have several interesting things that we sort of want to investigate at the same time. Number of sightings, right? So that's row count. while we want to investigate duration of sightings, and also the shape of the sightings. So there's probably, well, anyway, I think it may not be the most beautiful visualization, but it does allow you to see these three sort of competing data aspects all in the same visualization. So we can see, shape tells us one thing, the size tells us one thing, and the color, as we get closer to red, tells us something else. So this is an interesting data point just to think about how duration, number, and shape all kind of relate to one another. And again, we are still on day 185. We're in the hours of the night, 9 and 10, and in the modern period. So again, we're drilling into that X-Files era and trying to make a little bit more sense of the data set. And this is, there's a lot of, hopefully that loads, yeah. There's differing opinions on, I think I have another visualization. Yeah, thank you. There's differing opinions on word clouds, right? Or tag clouds, whatever you want to call it. I've always been a fan. No one should make, a decision about whether to close a branch or fire an employee on a word cloud or tag cloud or whatever you call it. But it does give you insight, right? Definitely, certainly gives you insight. And so this is, again, we have descriptions of, when you fill out the sighting, you describe it. And I'm just trying to pull out the words that are the most repeated. Now, I built this in a prior version of OAC or Data Viz. Actually, I built it in Data Viz Desktop the first time. I'm running in Oracle Analytics Cloud now. But we do have some features now in OAC that I should revisit, such as sentiment analysis. So it's pretty easy to layer in sentiment analysis using what's called data flow. So probably the next time I do this talk, I will include that. So there are some ways to really measure what people are trying to get across in textual attributes now. All I did was kind of try to give you a flavor of the most repeated words. And so you can see bright, moving, light, sky. Probably should do some data clean up to remove light and lights and some other things, but it gives you a flavor of, what is the most widely used words in the description. And I, put that side by side with another way that you might visualize it. So if you believe that the tag cloud is junk science and the bar chart's what you should use, well, there's there's both right there next to each other. I think the word cloud is more compelling, frankly. When it comes to engaging someone in a data story, it doesn't have to be so scientific. It's just about getting your point across. And in my mind, I think that's the better visualization. We're almost done. So the conclusion, every data story should have a conclusion, right? And I should repeat to you textually the things that I just showed you. And you can sum this up. There's infographic capabilities in OAC now. There's no screen that you can go to that says create infographic, but with the ability to add data points and images together on the same palette, you can build an infographic. So maybe, again, if I think about a redo of this presentation, I would do this infographic style, but I'm doing it more sort of presentation style, where you give a clear conclusion to the story you've just taken your audience on. And that's UFO sightings occur more in the summer and the fall. We saw that specifically in the month of July, and notably on the 4th of July. They are seen most often at night in the hours of 9 to 10 in the Midwest and the West Coast. We saw that both from the outlier screen, which when working is a little bit more compelling, and the geography or the map visualization that we saw. Their rise in frequency appears to correlate to key events. Now, I didn't scientifically prove to you that those events are indeed the thing that was compelling, or that did. I'm saying they correlate, right? I didn't say they were caused by. So my statement there is not false, but we don't, we haven't drawn a causal relationship between the X files. But you'd have a hard time convincing me it's anything else. So the rise appears to correlate with key events. Roswell, the space program, this wonderful television program that I miss dearly called the X-Files. And with that, the truth is out there. So with that, Mike, I think maybe we open it up for some questions if there are any.
Yes, no, definitely had a couple come in, and just so everybody's aware, please submit your question through the chat, which is at the bottom of your Zoom window. So Stuart, the first question that came in is from Larry, and thank you in advance, Larry. How do you introduce visualizations that people in our organization haven't seen or used before? So
I'll tell you, I'm not trying to sell you a red pill, but let me tell you an approach that we take. That we call it one more thing. And obviously I'm a big Steve Jobs fan, so I stole that directly from him. But at the end of Steve's presentations, he would always say one more thing. And so we sort of rallied around that and thought, number one, building things in today's world is easier than it used to be. With cloud technologies, data movement, and cloud data warehouses, we're not constrained with resources, with CPU cycles and storage the way we used to be. Long story short, it's easier to build things. And so what we do with our customers is they will give us an order. Sometimes the customer says, have some leverage with what you build what you think works, but that's almost never the case. They say, we need to reproduce this report, right? It needs to look like this. And we build that because that's what they want. But we also build either on a different dashboard page or side by side, depending on if we're in a POC or a sort of explore the capabilities or providing a finished product, we go ahead and build the other ways that they might think about visualizing data. We've been doing this a long time. We've done it with a lot of different customers, and we have seen what works and what doesn't work. Not that people working for individual customers don't have an immense amount of experience and skill. They do, but sometimes they're nuanced and constrained by their audience. There's nothing better than actually showing than telling. If there's anything that this talk was about, it's that. So instead of sitting down and describing to them the visualization that they may want instead of this one, just build it. It's so much easier to build today. And then if you look at most tools, most of the analytics tools that we use, I would say all of them have some way of tracking usage. And you can see in a scientific data-driven way, by the way, we're all data-driven, aren't we? We can measure, and that's what we do for a living, measure which of these visualizations are truly more compelling, at least by activity and usage. So, to kind of sum that up, give them different views of the data. As long as you give them what they ask for, is sort of the way we think about it, then there's nothing wrong with giving them some alternatives and then measure which ones are more effective. Next question, Mike.
Yeah, that's a great segue to the next question here from Kapal. Our organization likes to fit as many metrics onto a screen as possible. How do you balance density with readability / usability?
So I think there's a similar approach here. What was the gentleman's name again, Mike?
Kapal.
Kapal. Hope we're pronouncing that right, Kapal.
Yes.
So Kapal, I mean, yeah. Good. Yeah. It is a interesting problem, right? Because we do want fewer clicks. We don't want to be clicking all over the place to get information. We often know the value of what I'll just call a one-pager, right? So a one pager can be very, very effective because people have shorter attention spans. And so that is a concern. But also there's so we do want to pack it in, but there is the concern that really a human brain can only process between, I'm not a psychologist, between 7 and 14 pieces of information, sort of at a sitting, right? Or at a certain, we'll call session, but at a time, right? And so you start to overload the brain. There's a lot of science around too much choice can actually parallelize us. So there is a balance that needs to be found, right? You may not know when you've struck that balance, and I may not be able to predict what is going to strike that balance with your users, but we can certainly measure, right? So this is sometimes called A/B testing when it's automated. You can do manual or approximation of A/B testing, where you try out some things. Again, the sort of the same principle what I said before, which is it's easier to build things now than it used to be. You can roll out several versions. There are some tools, OAC doesn't have it built in, but there are some JavaScript-based tools that you can use with any web-based technology that could round robin or sample different different screens to a different percentage of users and measure it. You're probably not going to get that out of the box, and I'm not sure it's worth it. But what you can do is at least expose different versions of the same visualization. You can try the osmosis approach of not declaring what you're doing and just seeing what people find and use. Or you might actually be upfront about it and say, look, we're trying to make our audience happy. And what that means is we're going to be rolling out several versions of our dashboards. And it's really important that A, you provide us feedback if you have it, and B, just use what you like and we'll measure it. So I think that you could try different amounts of density, different takes on whether or not you take out that second row, that last row of metrics, remove that one column of metrics, depending on how you designed it, try it, see what takes, measure it, always measure.
Very good, thank you. And we've got time for one more question here before we reach the top of the hour. This one's from Pamela. What are options or approaches to adding custom visualizations?
Yeah, so for the first time, there's an Oracle Analytics product that really makes this easy. I won't say easy, right? So, but easier, right? So, data visualization, which is a piece of the overall OAC. It's the more self-service. It's the newer visualization tool inside of OAC. It is SDK driven, right? So there's a development kit designed specifically for you and I to extend it, right? It's not hacking like it was in answers and dashboards. It is designed to be extended. And they use that same extension kit when they roll out new visualizations, right? So that was why they had to kind of scrap answers, is it didn't have anything like that. So when they started over, they said, we need to be able to easily extend the kit ourselves. And by the way, why wouldn't we invite our users to extend that kit? Now that SDK is open on both ends. So you can plug in visualizations on the top, and you can plug in connectors, different sort of data sets to connect to different database or data store, I should say, technologies at the bottom that you can bring in. So it's open on both ends. But what most people extend it the most with is with visualizations. There's a lot of great YouTube videos provided by the Oracle Analytics product management team. Specifically, anything you see from Philippe Lyons, just eat that up. He talks about how easy it is, and there's an reach out to us, because I'm going to butcher this, but there's a data for good movement going on, a combination of the Oracle Analytics community and Oracle product management, reporting on some of the sort of hard-hitting issues of the day. And a lot of that is being done with custom visualizations. I can point you in that direction if you reach out to us, and I'll make sure I connect you with some of the great you know, some of the stuff the Vlamis brothers are doing, their custom visualizations that they've built. We'll connect you with some of that and walk you through how to do that. But richer than ever before. Now's the time to investigate custom visualizations.
Perfect, thank you. All right, well, this concludes our webinar for today here. Thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you, Stuart, for leading us through this presentation and conversation. If we didn't get to your question, feel free to reach out to us on social media, and also look forward to this recording being sent out in the next couple of days to you. So thank you, everybody. Stay safe and have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.